All right, what up, everybody? It's long overdue. I've been meaning to do this, but I did want to give a case for rooftop solar. Um, Beyond just sort of the obvious ones, I think there's a couple reasons why something you might want to give some consideration to. All right, first off, we'll take a look at a couple of categories. We'll break this down by the investment case, the environmental case, security and future proofing, and then finally I'll wrap things up with risks. So in the investment case, further break this down into cost structure, current incentives, financing, and then this is the big one is ROI. Basically, how many years does it take for the system to pay for itself? All right, so when we start looking at costs, there's a couple things we got to do. So I'm going to break down my assumptions. And to be clear, when I did these assumptions, I was assuming I biased conservatively every opportunity I could. So if ever there was hey, it's kind of a tweener, it's close, I would usually round to whatever was made my numbers look worse. So for example, if I had a $325 average electric bill over the last year, just rounded down to 300. $4 for gasoline in California. Yeah, right. You're not going to get that. So anyway, my assumptions are I've got a $300 per month electric bill. Clearly, that's going to be a little higher in the summer if you're using air conditioning, a little lower in the winter if you're not using air conditioning. I'm assuming a 9 kilowatt system from Tesla in this case, and specifically Tesla with batteries. So this would be, in my case, with 2 Tesla Powerwalls. Your mileage may vary. Maybe you don't need 2, but I think 2 is probably the right number. I'm also assuming a 6% compound annual growth rate in the electricity cost. 6% is conservative. Again, it's probably something higher than that, especially in today's climate, but 6% should work for our purposes. I'm assuming a $4 per gallon cost of gasoline, and then 20 cents per kilowatt hour off peak, 50 cents per kilowatt hour on peak. Again, these are California rates. Mileage may vary if you're in Nevada. For example, the off-peak rate or cost in Nevada is 5 cents per kilowatt hour. Thanks, Gavin Newsom. One of the other costs that I have, assumptions that I have going here is that if you install solar on your house, you'll install a large enough system for all intents and purposes, unlimited excess, meaning you will exceed your current requirements to such a degree that you can't sort of overuse what you build in. And for me, yeah, a 9 kilowatt system is going to be plenty. For comparison's sake, I had a 8 kilowatt system at my house in Reno. It was twice the size of my current place. So yeah, this 9 kilowatts should be fine. A little bit bigger house, you could do a little bit bigger system. But the big thing I want to push across here is I'm assuming an abundance mindset after solar. So before solar, you might be doing conservative things. After solar, you more or less have prepaid for your energy needs. Okay, so what did I pay? These are real numbers. So the total system cost for me was $37,000. And I put a little asterisk next to that because that comes down after some incentives, but we'll touch on that later. This is what I think was kind of surprising is that if you look at the actual hardware, so this is the solar panels, the inverter, the conduit, there's some special some special metering they need to do to your meter to make it a smart meter, some special electrical switching, blah, 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 blah. How shocking is it? It's only $7,000 for all that stuff. The batteries are about $17,000, and this is what's so crazy is the labor is about $13,000. So within the labor, I'm also including permitting, inspections, all of the overhead that comes along with it. So, backing out, right, like how's about 40% of the cost are batteries and 40% of the cost are labor, 20% of the cost of the entire system is the actual hardware. And why does that suck, or, what does that mean to us? Well, the reason why that's maybe an important thing to look at is you could look at this like, well, I'm just going to wait for prices to come down. I noted that it cost me about $37,000 to put on a similar size system a couple years ago, and that was without the batteries. So how is it possible that in 2022, this is only 4 years later, it's still $37,000, but now includes the batteries? And this is basically, this is explained through a concept called Wright's Law, but basically what it says is as time goes on, anything that can be made in mass manufacturing is going to continue to get cheaper. So you might have a friend or buddy or somebody who's like, oh man, spent $60,000 in 1990 to get a 2 kilowatt hour system put on my, or 2 kilowatt system put on my house. It doesn't work for anything. It's bad. It sucks. And I don't disagree with that, right? Like adjusted for inflation, that might be 120 grand for something that was never going to pay for itself. Going out 2040, are the solar panels suddenly going to be free? No. I mean, they will decrease in price. They will never get to zero, but they will approach marginal cost of the components that go into them. That said, flip this around and labor is going to continue to go up, and that's just a function of inflation. So my general take on it is like, look, the components for solar are likely to get cheaper in the future, but labor is likely to get more expensive. So we're in this kind of window right now where I don't expect prices on solar systems to get a whole lot cheaper or more expensive in the near term. So moving on to incentives. What are the incentives right now? There are some local incentives with PG&E, but they're really not worth discussing. I mean, these are maybe $1,000. They're not going to do a whole heck of a lot for you. The major incentive that you're tracking is a federal tax credit. So this is called the ITC, or investment tax credit. In 2021, it's 26%. In 2022, it's also 26%. In 2023, it's 22%. And this drops to 0% in 2024. So the big takeaway here is if you're going to do solar and you want, a large portion of it, a quarter, almost a third of it, paid by Uncle Sam, then yeah, like this year or next year really are years to do it. After that, the system is, even if it's comparably priced, you're going to get a whole heck of a lot less of it back. Now, what about financing? All right, so I did not pay for this all up front because I basically felt like the opportunity cost on paying out $37,000 all at once was just not what I was interested in. So I did zero down. There's zero loan origination fee. It's a 10-year term, 5% interest. And the way that the payments work are months 1 through 17. So this is about 1.5 years. It's $290 a month. I'm just comfortable calling that $300. And then payments 18 plus. So this is the next 8.5 years jumps up to $400. And there's some reasons for that, mostly centering around the assumption that the tax credit you're going to get then goes to pay down the loan. But you can keep that money if you want. It would just bring the cost of your financing up a little bit, not a considerable amount. Okay, so what does the return on investment look like? So how do we get to this 37? This is the basic return on investment, assuming that, hey, look, what does your electric bill look like? Let's say it's that $300 per month times 12 months, $3,600 a year. It's going to take you about 10 years to recoup that initial cost. But the reason why I don't think that that's a fair comparison is it doesn't include the incentives. When you look at the incentives, okay, what is, the 26% off that $37,000 price tag now brings your actual out-of-pocket cost down to $27,000. And that now, even at $3,600 a year, that's now a 7.5-year payback on that initial investment. But wait, it doesn't really end there. And the reason why is that $300 per month electric bill is actually just assuming kind of the house as it is. It doesn't sort of assume the house that you're going to have or the house that you're growing into. So for example, if you just assume this $300 per month right now, sure, but what if you have an electric car? And so I'm going to explain the math on this a little bit. So I'm assuming you would drop about $140 per month if you had a gas car, and you've got 2 of them. Now, if you're paying for the electricity as is, that's only about $70. So you're about half price right there just by switching gas to electric. But this is money that all accrues to PG&E. So boom, let's shift that over and assume we've got 2 cars. That $70 is now roped into what is going to be covered under your solar system. Also potentially your water heater. So if you have a gas water heater, that might be about $50 a month. When you go electric, it shoots down to 25, and now that's roped in under this total electric bill. And then heating, for example, if I could touch on this later. Probably require a whole other video, but my assumption is in the future, everybody's going to switch over to basically a heat pump as opposed to a forced air natural gas heater. But anyway, don't do that early. Just do that whenever your regular furnace dies. But anyway, boom, now we shift that over here. And so this gets to be a little bit different. So now if we look at, hey, this would be our electric bill if we didn't have solar. So I'm assuming with that abundant energy mindset, you are now prepaying for all this. And what you're doing is you're shifting all of these former gas needs over to electric, okay? And when that happens, now we're talking about, okay, this is only a 4.5-year payback. If you paid $37,000 up front and you roped in all of these additional costs over here onto the electric side, take you 4.5 years to pay back that system. But what about if you do that with financing, assuming the CAGR, basically this is the increased cost of electricity, right? So how long does it take you to break even if you're doing that $300 a month, right? When do you get to that $400 line? And gosh, I realize this isn't making a ton of sense, but where am I getting that number from? If you recall here with the financing, I'm saying, hey, look, the payment once it normalizes is going to be $400 a month. So how do you get there? Well, I'm saying that like, hey, look, for about 5 years, your net cost out of pocket with financing is going to be about $100 a month. And that's only really going to last for about 6 years. And the reason why is if we use a 6% compound annual growth rate and what you're paying for electricity, so this is the rate that PG&E is going to charge you, is going up a little bit every year. So 6 years from now, I'm predicting that the all else being equal, if you didn't get an electric car, if you didn't do any other stuff, you'd be paying $401 or about $400 per month anyway. So what you're really talking about is this $100 a month net output for really these couple of years. And after that point, your solar system is now paying for itself completely. And keep in mind, this is only for the remainder of the term of the loan. Once you've paid off the loan, everything is free electricity, or it's prepaid electricity. Like at that point, all of the gains are accruing to you. So you could look at that a little bit more like the system itself is paying out about an 8% rate of return. Contrasted this with what it's going to cost you if you didn't do solar. All right, so real quick, I'm going to touch on the environmental reason for doing this, and which is to say that there isn't one. Yes, it's great that you want to have an electric car, and it's great that maybe you want to have your own solar, but the reality of it is this is about like mandating plastic straws, okay? Like, yes, it does make some difference, but just not enough. The world is going to be just fine if you don't do solar. So I'm completely striking environmental from the reasons you might want to consider doing this. Maybe one of the other biggest reason for me perhaps is just the concept of security. Especially since moving to California, I've noticed that the grid is increasingly unstable. So whereas a power outage in my previous place was very rare, we're talking like, maybe once a year, if that, and it was very quick. You notice the power would go out, 5 minutes later, it's back on. That's not the case here. So I lose power where I am at least once a month, and typically when it goes out, it's out for a couple of hours, up to a couple of days. Now, the couple of days thing is a pretty big problem when you start talking about things like freezers. Like, you're going to lose all of the food that you have in your freezer. So, if you decided to freeze stuff, yeah, all of that's going to go bad. And I don't see that getting any better, considering that the major problem that PG&E is fighting against right now is, hey, they've got these fires. These are caused by these power lines that they've all built above ground. So over the next however many 20, 30 years, California might have a plan to bury those lines, which significantly reduces the fire risk. But in the meantime, you're kind of left holding the, you're left with a tab. So that's not where you want to be. I don't want to be responsible for PG&E's deficiencies. Also, there's kind of an unpredictable energy landscape. So, right now is really, really good example. Obviously hot button issue right now is what's going on in Ukraine. So you can see that, hey, look, worst own goal ever is Germany decided to turn off their nuclear power plants, and they became completely dependent on Russia for energy, right? Like, they got them by the balls. And that sucks. Well, imagine what it's like when you just don't care anymore what's going on. Hey, there's a problem with one of the refineries in Louisiana. I don't care. I make my own electricity. Okay, like, okay, well, there's a war that might break out with Russia and Ukraine. I don't care. I make my own electricity. How much is gas at the pump? I don't care. Like, these things no longer affect you whatsoever. And the other thing that this protects you from is kind of this regulatory capture. This is also a risk, but right now the big thing is that who's paying for this, right? Like, when California wants to bury the lines, who's going to pay for it? You are. When there's a fire and they shut off your electricity, who's going to pay for it? You are. When California decides to green up its energy grid, who's going to pay for it? You are. But you can front run all of that stuff by taking basically by securing today's prices going forward. So you can finance it too. So it's not like you have to do one lump sum payment. But now that value accrues to your solar provider as opposed to PG&E. It's a total shift of money. So, you can kind of think over the next 10 years, I'm going to send $37,000 over to Tesla as opposed to $37,000 over to PG&E is sort of the way to look at that. Another way to think of this, or another reason, is kind of this future proofing, and I'm going out on a limb here a little bit. One of the capabilities that I hope is going to come out, the Ford Lightning is advertising this. The Cybertruck is likely going to have it. It's been surprisingly mum, but I just don't think most people understand what this capability is and what it can provide. So there's this capability called V2G, or vehicle to grid. I'm going to have this system installed at my house. It's going to be a 2 Powerwall system. That should be completely adequate. It's actually going to be more than enough. If the power goes out in the summer, it'll run my air conditioner all night. We can do washer, dryer, charge my car. It's going to be totally satisfactory. But keep in mind that one car worth, the amount of battery capability held in one car is worth about 4 Powerwalls, right? So if suddenly now you can use your car to store energy too, that could open up a lot of really interesting windows as far as like, okay, well, now you can be sort of a seller of opportunity. And this dovetails really beautifully in this concept of virtual power plant, where when the energy rates are low, you can buy electricity, and when energy rates are high, you sell it. Now, what's the likelihood that PG&E starts turning something like this on? It's pretty low. I mean, they've already invested in these things called peaker plants, which basically only exist to service that high demand period, and then they sell it at obscenely high rates, double or triple what the normal rate would be to you or I or anybody who's consuming the electricity. Whereas, if you allow this virtual power plant thing to exist, and now either your at-home batteries or actually your car, if you elected to, could send electricity back, but you could set the price. Like, oh, well, I'm not going to sell my electricity back to PG&E unless the price is, I don't know, double or triple what it ordinarily I'd be buying it at. But you become a buffer and opportunistic there. So as an example, this isn't just total, pie in the sky. It might happen someday sort of thing. Right now in Vermont, one Powerwall will net you about $100 a month from their utility provider. And again, what are they doing? They're using your batteries to levelize their grid. So they feed you extra electricity at times when it's cheap, and they will buy it back from you at times when it's expensive. That totally levelizes the grid. It solves the solar problem, the wind problem. Basically, the entire alternative energy landscape has the same problem, which is it doesn't scale with electricity consumption. But when you start putting in batteries everywhere, it solves the whole problem. So if something like that rolled out in California, yeah, it changes the math pretty drastically. If suddenly you're making $200 a month because you bought 2 Powerwalls, or okay, well, now your car's allowed to play and you're making quite a bit more than that. But is this going to happen in California? I have no idea. It's not, I've heard precisely 0 proposals to make this happen, although Tesla's doing this sort of in shadow mode. They let you volunteer for it, but you're not getting paid for it. My suspicion is that's just proof of concept stuff. We'll see if that lets it turn on later. Okay, well, what are the risks? I would say there's a couple. So the risk that either Tesla doesn't ever turn on V2G, and there's no virtual power plants. These are kind of like meh risks for me, right? Like those aren't things I'm planning on. Those would just be kind of tailwind things that would be bonuses if they happen later, and they would change the return on investment profile to be a lot faster. You would make that money back. Now, this is a real risk. So PG&E. So there was a proposal floated and pretty quickly shot down whereby PG&E wanted to charge solar customers, and if you had solar on your house, $10 per installed kilowatt. So if you had a 9 kilowatt system on your house, you'd be paying PG&E $90 a month for the privilege of having that solar on your home. Further, they wanted to kill the net metering, meaning that they would no longer buy back electricity from you at market rate. They wouldn't buy it back at all. So why would they do this? Well, I would say it's survival instinct. The reality is, PG&E is a public company. Over the next 20 to 30 years, my prediction is that they sort of go away, or they're going to have to shrink in a pretty drastic way. And that's not pie in the sky stuff either. This is already happening in both Hawaii and in Germany, where as alternative energy methods come online, specifically ones that are distributed, what you find is that the central control authority over the power grid, in this case, it's PG&E. They start dying. So they have to shrink drastically in size. And that's just not what a public company wants to do. So they're going to invoke some survival instinct stuff. I don't know how it's going to play out. They have a lot of investment that is going to pretty quickly become worthless, and I don't know how it goes. So if they decide to go after folks who install solar on their house, this completely ruins all of my ROI math. So that's a real risk. One of the other risks that I just thought of, I want to touch on, is the risk that you sell your house before the return on investment happens. And this happened to me in Reno, where I more or less calculated my return on investment was going to be about 8 years. And there you go. I sold my house after 4 years after installing solar. So did I get my money back on that? No. And also, a real estate agent might tell you, like, yeah, buyers are really interested in houses with solar on them. That was not the case for me anyway. The big idea there is that so many people have gotten bad solar loans that they become more of a liability than an asset, at least to first blush. So you do a little digging, you figure out, oh, this thing is paid off, it's warranted, great. But in a lot of cases, if you're going to buy a house, as the new buyer is going to inherit the old buyer's loan, and they typically are on unfavorable terms. So anyway, those are just some kind of thoughts on the risks. The last thing, and this is total bonus round stuff, is why Tesla. So you can go with a number of other solar installers. Sunrun, there's a bunch of good ones out there, but why did I pick Tesla? This is, I'm biased, very biased, but these are some pretty objective reasons to want to pick Tesla for your system. They're the cheapest if you factor in the batteries, right? So there might be some other companies out there who will do the system install itself a little bit less, but when you actually start to factor in, well, what is the grid type battery system? If you include that in the cost, there's no doubt, like by a mile, it's going to be Tesla for the cheapest overall cost of rooftop solar. Also, I like Tesla because, in my opinion, they're the most likely to honor a warranty. So the panels are warranted for 25 years. The batteries are warranted for 10. Everything should last about double that time. So we're seeing now people with Powerwalls, they've got no degradation going on, or at least below the advertised rate. The panels, even at 25 years, they're going to be producing 90% of the original output. So, those are very, you could take those to the bank. Those are conservative warranties. But the reality is, if something does go wrong, you do want the company to come and fix it. And if you go with a mom and pop solar down the street, odds are pretty good they're not going to be in business. So who's going to honor that warranty? So that's why I like Tesla. At this point, they've survived the crucible. They're a public, S&P 500. They're not going anywhere. This is the company I am betting on will actually be around in 10, 20, 25 years if something goes wrong with the system. And then finally, the big reason I like Tesla is they're the only company that has a whole ecosystem solution. So the way that I look at Apple as a complete information ecosystem, so whether it's a Apple Watch, the AirPods, the phone. These are basically all dealing in the business of information, and everything works. It just talks to each other. It's great. With Tesla, I would say Tesla has created an energy ecosystem. So the car talks to the charger, talks to the power walls, talks to the solar panels. Everything is under one sort of software solution, which I find really appealing, because whenever an improvement does roll out, for example, if they ever got to the point where virtual power plants become possible, Tesla could turn that on overnight. Versus you might be dealing with a lot of competing software solutions if you add batteries from a company in China, your solar panels from a company in Canada, your charger from a different company altogether. So you want to keep these under one software solution to the extent that you can, or the maximum extent possible. So anyway, that's the whole reason I'm going solar. I think it's a good time to go. That's just my opinion. But anyway, hope you agree. Hope you get it. See ya.